I am bringing on the extraordinary, the amazing Yanik Silver. Yanik, I was just telling the story about how we met through Makosi and how when I said to her, I want to be with a group of people that I'm going to be so inspired by, that I've been the sharp end of the spear for so long. I want to be the back end of the spear. I want to be with people who are on the bleeding edge of the movement that I want to be part of, the change makers, the ones who see this cosmic journey that we're on. And Makosi immediately said, oh, you got to meet Yanik. And since that time, we've become friends and colleagues and had some incredible discussions. And I'm so honored that you're here with us today. So everybody, please welcome Yanik Silver. This is going to be a lot of fun. Yanik is really, what we're going to be talking about is being a catalyzer of catalyzers, or cosmic catalyzers, because that's what the journey is about, right? It's not necessarily just about this earth. It's so beyond that. So hello and welcome.
Hi, Suzanne. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Makosi's like, well, you have to meet Suzanne. She's like the female version of you. I'm like, okay. And then we had that amazing synchronicity also about you had the bungee jump photo. And I'm like, oh, you mean like this one? And I'm like, and then I'm sure like a few other things.
Forgot about that. So just to explain to people what that means, on my website, there's a picture of me jumping, bungee jumping in New Zealand. And so Yanik, when we got introduced via email, went and looked at my website, and he answered my email with a picture of him with the same exact photograph jumping in New Zealand. And it was like, oh, I guess we are the same person. So good.
And gold and silver.
Yanik, say again?
I said gold and silver.
I never thought of that before. Look at us alchemizing.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. So Yanik, one of the things that's really cool about people like you, for me, is that you had more traditional business experience, right? You're an entrepreneur, you're successful. I'd love for you to tell people about what that was about. And then you had a change of heart at some point in time and decided to redirect your life in a certain way. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your origin story so that our viewers can really understand, like, you were in that whole corporate world for a while.
Yeah, not corporate, I don't think, but entrepreneurial. I mean, definitely business. I'll start by saying this, that I still believe business can be the greatest lever for making a difference in the world, which is
as do I. Yep.
Yeah. And so I love this idea of like blooming where you're planted, and we'll talk about that, instead of being bloom where you're planted. But my background in business and entrepreneurship, it starts with my dad. So my parents came over from Russia when I was 3 years old. My dad came over with like $256 in his pocket. I always get that number wrong. He corrects me, but it's something like that. And for me, my mom, my grandmother, and he went to work at a local hospital. And then pretty quickly he was moonlighting on the side, repairing medical equipment. And the administrators found out about it, and they basically gave him the ultimatum of like, you got to stop or we're going to fire you. And he's like, well, he told me later on, he's like, I didn't even like my boss, so I quit. And, as all entrepreneurs kind of following that pathless path. And so I grew up in a family business selling medical equipment. And I started telemarketing when I was 14 years old, calling on my own leads to sell latex gloves. And then at 16, I got a car, but only if I went out and made sales. And so I had, that was the deal. And I pretty quickly realized that cold calling really sucked. But I had made a couple sales, like including an entire surgery center that I sold. And, I'm this little 16, 17-year-old punk essentially, and talking to 50-year-old doctors. And that's why it was just so annoying. And he gave me a Jay Abraham tape, which is all about direct response marketing. And I just listened to this thing over and over again, which I was fascinated by. Like, you could use words to write letters or ads or whatever it was to have people raise their hands and be like, yes, I want to buy what you've got, or yes, I'll even give you money. And I'm like, that is fascinating. Like, how do you do that without talking to someone? So I just learned everything I possibly could about copywriting, direct response. And then I started building that with my dad's business. It gave me this amazing laboratory to go experiment. I grew my dad's business from a little regional player to a national competitor. And then, I think that following your heart is always scary, but never wrong. And there's all these moments, I can see these little moments, and I call them cosmic alarm clocks. And there's these little cosmic alarm clocks, and, some of them are just like thrust upon you. So I had, my clients are doctors. So I had doctors be like, oh, well, could you do some marketing for me? I see you're really good at this. I'm like, sure. Okay. And so I did some consulting and helping them. And then I'm like, well, that doesn't really scale. And then I learned from a guy named Dan Kennedy that you could sell your own information. And I'm like, oh, this sounds really interesting. So I wrote an ad that went out in Dermatologic Surgery News, and I got 10 dermatologists to raise their hands and be like, oh, I'm interested in learning how to get more cosmetic cases. And because that's what I had done before consulting wise. And I wrote a whole big sales letter, and literally at the very last day of the deadline, out through the fax machine was like this little fax of someone buying for $900 my course. And I was like, oh my God, someone bought what I sold. And then I'm like, oh my God, I have to go create this thing. So wrote them a letter saying it's going to be republished. I'm not going to charge your card for 30 days. And then that gave me the impetus to go do it. Clocked out at 5 o'clock every single day, worked till like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning on this material, but got it together. And then I remember I was like answering the phone underneath my dad's or underneath my office in the desk. But then, so that was my next thing, was like the internet. So the internet was starting to come online. I'm like, oh, okay, I can, this feels like my kind of thing. And so it was a really hard decision to leave my family business, but it just felt like that was the right thing to do. So then fast forward, started doing really well doing that. And people are like, oh, how did you do that? Could you teach me? So then I started teaching people how to take their own information and knowledge and sell that. And then about 15 years ago, I just had the really big cosmic alarm clock moment, which was, am I happy? Would I be happy doing what I'm doing 10 years from now? And that kind of led me onto this whole other evolutionary path.
So good. And how many of you can relate to that more traditional path? I certainly was on it for a long time, like doing the work the way you're supposed to, innovating because that's who I am as a person, but not realizing necessarily that you can create a whole new path. So I love this concept of a cosmic alarm clock. What does it feel like to you?
The cosmic alarm clock is like a little voice that gets louder and louder if you don't answer it, and it can also like be something that bangs you on the head harder and harder and harder. So for many people, it's going to be either relationship related, it could be financial related, it could be health related. I find it like it's just going to be something that is like whispering to you, and these little voices, like they're not gonna shout necessarily unless it keeps getting to the point where it really requires that to happen, and that does happen too. I remember talking to Kimball Musk, who's Elon Musk's brother, and we were going on a hike together, and he was sharing more of his story about how he ended up in the hospital from a snowboarding accident. And he was like, it was like a very like it was like this minor little slope or something. He couldn't believe he ended up like hitting his head and just like, so he's in the hospital and he has a lot of time to think. And he's like, I really don't like what I'm doing. I don't like being the CEO of this internet advertising company. I also I don't think I should be married to this person. And then it was like this complete, and it wasn't like, you think of Musk and you think of, all the, obviously the wealth and so forth, but he was in a spot there where it wasn't like an easy decision. And so he's like, I want to go back to cooking. I loved cooking as a kid. I loved, that. So then he ended up opening up the kitchen in Boulder and then going and following that route. And he also has a great nonprofit called Big Green, which is all about food and creating that to go into school systems to teach kids about nutrition and food, and also in business sense. So, it takes sometimes this big bang on the head, but if you can either hit snooze on that cosmic alarm clock, which then requires a louder alarm clock, or you can answer it. And so for me, it was that question, right? Like, so I love questions. Your questions open up the answers. And so it was, am I happy doing what I'm doing? And would I be happy doing it for 10 years from now? And so I use journaling as my way of processing. And so I journal almost every day. And so in there, I wrote about this question, and from the outside in, everything looked great, making a lot of money, helping a lot of people too. So when I was helping, like there wasn't a conference or anything I could attend as a speaker, or even just an attendee, where someone would come up and be like, dude, you changed my life. I sell guitar lessons online now and I'm financially free. I'm like, that's amazing. And that's always great. But then it didn't feel like that was the ultimate of what I could be doing. And so it came to me in my journal. I'm like, all right, these 3 things that I really want to combine together. And I love drawings and illustrations. And it was so it was a $, happy face, and a heart in 3 interconnected circles. And so I've since learned that's called the Venn
$,
a happy face, and a heart.
And a heart. So somebody dropped those in the comment. That's amazing.
Yeah.
$, happy face, heart. Got it.
Yeah. So this is what it looked like.
Oh my gosh, you have it right there.
Well, I just drew it. So this is.
Oh, Oh, I
That's what it
love
looks
it.
like. And that's, this intersection is what I call the maverick entrepreneur. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be the thing that makes me the happiest I could be. It's going to be hanging out with my friends. And, you start like scratching your own itch. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to hang out with my other entrepreneur friends. We're going to do amazing adventures. We're going to combine it with charity. We're going to, have business sessions in the middle of nowhere. And so I'm a big fan of like, you just put the post in the ground and you figure it out, right? Like the same way with like the course that I sold. I'm like, I'm going to put it out there and we're going to sell it. And then, we'll figure it out. And again, I told that doctor, like, it's going to be republished and you have to be ethical about it, not take their money and then be like, all right, well, maybe it'll show up. I think it's called vaporware in the software business, but I was never in the software business, but you need to deliver. And one of the things that I actually wrote in my journal very early on was I get rich by enriching others 10x to 100x in return for what they pay me. And that's also one of my favorite questions.
Rich by enriching others. What was the rest of it?
10x to 100x what they pay me in return. So, if you think as another question, which is how can I create 10x to 100x in value for anyone that I serve? So that was my, these are sort of the pillars of what I was doing. And I'm like, okay, this is great. And I'm going to, the first thing was a Baja Dune buggy racing adventure and got 28 people and we lost $40,000 on them. I'm like, it's okay. And then we did something else. And then after about $400,000, my wife's like, what the hell are you doing? And I still had the internet publishing company that's sort of paying for everything over here and it's sponsoring the other company. And it's, like when you're doing like, there's all sorts of ways of propping it up where it's not really having to live on its own. But at that point, I realized very quickly that I could either go back to what I was doing before and it would feel like golden handcuffs. Like it'd be really easy to do it. I knew what I was doing. I was making a lot of money there, but it didn't feel like, it felt like your soul was dying a little bit every single day that you were doing it because you knew it wasn't what you were meant to be doing. Or I could make this bigger leap and not know exactly what it was. And it would require me to, I shut down a bunch of things that were making money because it wasn't in full alignment with what I wanted it to be and where I was going. And I'm like, I don't know what this is, but there's a bigger why. And it really forced me to re-look at my why. And the why wasn't, I'm going to go build this adventure travel company for entrepreneurs. It was, we want to change the way business is played. And so getting deeper and deeper into the why. And then through that journey, I was able to also pull together these other pieces from some amazing business icons and celebrities that are well-known, but then also a bunch that are not well-known. And that became the format and framework for something called Evolved Enterprise, which is all about how do you create a greater mission and impact with what you're doing. And that aligns, I'll just use the word with your soul, essentially. It's like, how do you connect your head, which is the business side, your heart, which is the impact you want to make, and then your higher purpose, bring that all into alignment. And then that's where the real magic happens. And that's the seismic shift that I see happening in business right now too, is if it's just business only, it's kind of a losing game unless you got a monopoly or something that, is propped up by government regulations. But anyway, that whole process forced me, we also changed that little icon. It wasn't a dollar sign anymore. It became a tree to represent growth. So it's growth, impact, and fun. And so really evolutionary growth too. And that's where my own evolutionary journey really began. As a kid, I was a weird kid. You and I have talked about this, and you were a weird kid too.
I'm probably weirder, but yes, I get
it. So I was really into all sorts of things as a weird kid, and then it forced me, like I actually had to almost go back to ground zero in a way and be like this isn't working. Like I don't understand why. Like the same blueprint, the same roadmap wasn't working anymore. And so I had to really dig into my spiritual practices and start again and I had been a student of personal growth since I was 17, listening to tapes, all sorts of stuff. And it's like, okay, well, what is this? And what am I really meant to be doing? And so one of the questions I asked was, I asked my 111-year-old self, what do I need to know when things are kind of going sideways? Because I'd built
111-year-old self.
111-year-old self. So I built, 7, 8 different product services, all hit the 7-figure mark. And then this was not working. Like I couldn't understand it now. So passionate. I felt like this was my thing. And so my answer with my non-dominant hand, which is another technique, which I love, So using your left hand for me, it opens up your entire brain. It's this way of unlocking great wisdom. And so I asked my 111-year-old self, and I answered, the answer was light 1,000 suns who each have the potential to light another 1,000 suns. I'm like, whoa. And that was when we changed the name to Maverick 1000. And we really stepped into this, I guess, tip of the spear, as you mentioned at the beginning. It's really, that, and for me, that was where I was too. It was like that journey. And that was in 2010, I think, in 2011. And then we actually ended up going to the Riviera Maya and spent the night in this Mayan village for 2012. And that was the big shift of what we did with Maverick during that Mayan calendar change, and just really stepped into that evolutionary growth as a big part of what we're doing.
So can you guys see why Makosi thought that Yanik and I were soul brother and sister? It's like he's saying all the dare human things without calling him dare human, because I think when you're tapped into source, the message is the same. It's like, know yourself, live your purpose, get shit done and make money, because that's the only way to actually make things happen. Take aligned action to do it, and then go be the change you want to see in the world. And that is the dare human way, the Tao of dare human. And it makes so much sense to me. And what I love about what you do is that you do it at an impact level that's quite large. And you have attracted people around you that are really big entrepreneurs who want to be change makers, or change makers who are already social entrepreneurs and want to take it even bigger. Me being in that case, right? And so as we think about future her, as we think about creating a world where masculine and feminine energetics are influencing the world equally, that we can play in the field of, it's not just for one group over the other group, but we can start looking at how business can be used as a vehicle for good, which is a true belief of mine. I'm curious how you see this going. Where is this evolutionary path for us as a humanity that right now does not value people and planet over profit? We value in the aggregate, we value profit first, and often at the sake of humans and the planet.
Yeah, and I think that's changing. And I think it's like it's like this graduation that's happening, and you're seeing, like you start seeing. So, and on December 22nd, 2022, I like number alliteration and all sorts of things. So we were actually we had just got back from Antarctica, and on 2/2/22, we did an interesting kind of thing in Antarctica about saying that there's two choices right now. There's business as usual, and there's a new way of being. And I call it evolved enterprise, others have called it conscious capitalism. It's whatever, it's triple bottom line, whatever, it doesn't matter, but it's all coming from the same place, and exactly what you're talking about. And it's this choice point, and you can see the results of business as usual. That's kind of where we are now. And then the choice point is like, how do we create a better game that's worth playing for everyone, that is inclusive for everyone, that is something that we want to be a part of, that is for all of human thriving and evolution. And this is where, I feel like this is where the universe is also helping us evolve into. Like it's when you show up, you're kind of on that team, and when you step into that full alignment of who you are, then even more so, like all these magical things start showing up. And I look at synchronicities as kind of the language of the universe, and it helps you, it tells you when you're on the right path or not. And it's like, it's a different way of communicating. And so all these things start showing up, the right people, the right, random books show up, the right, just all these things that you couldn't even imagine, and partners and all these things are just magically drawn to you. But you have to take that first couple steps, and it has to be in alignment with higher purpose. And when you're talking about integrating the male female kind of energetics and the aspect, like that's this higher way, that's that other way of being. And so I also think of like a third way, right? There's only this way of being or this way of being, but the third way is integrating all of it. And so that to me is also the way of what's happening here. And it's not just saying, okay, business is only business, or, language is so important too. I think your words create your world, right? And so if you think about the business world, there's been some language that's developed like, oh, it's only business. Okay. So then it's okay to go do, something that you might not do over here in your world because it's only business or it's just business. Or there's like, in marketing, there's a lot of language around like, what's your target, what's your, how are you, I don't know, what's the tripwire that you're using? What's the, well, no, oh, I'm killing it, or whatever. Like, to me,
A
language
lot
is,
of military language, for sure.
yeah, right. And you don't realize, but that does have perceptions that show up in how you react and how you relate to things. And so, if, like, for me, I love ancient teachings. I love going back to, it could be indigenous wisdom. I learned from so many people, and I think everyone has a piece of the puzzle. And so, you look at some of the indigenous wisdoms that I've learned from, it's like 7 generations is the way of thinking. And so when you have to think like that, that's a whole different way of saying, and what I've been taught to by some incredible wisdom keepers is like, humans are one little person thing on the hoop of life, and we're actually no better or worse than, let's say, an ant or a whale or whatever it is, or trees, and so I see that there is going to be a time, and you're starting to see it too, a little bit more, like certain countries have given nature actual voices by including them in their constitution or different things like that. So to me, like, the concept of an advisory board is great. Like, most businesses have an advisory board, but I think part of this future is also like, let's give a seat at the table to the earth, or to nature, or to deep wisdom, whatever that is, or bring in shamans and bring in elders to sit on our boards, and give them that voice as well, or who speaks for those that don't necessarily have a voice at the table. And then it gets really interesting, because now we're looking at things from a whole different sort of framework and paradigm. And again, I look at everything as like, it has to also have results, right? Like, it has to work. And so the other part of that story that I didn't mention about when we, I kind of connected to this, the deeper wisdom was, I think we had like a 700 to 800% bump in revenue. Like, everything started getting way better because of that greater mission and purpose and impact. And I just think that more and more you're going to start seeing, like, so the seismic shift is people want to buy from companies that have a greater mission and purpose. So every single year we've seen this tick up and up and up, and people are reading and want to know their stories and the mission and the purpose and all these things. And so they're using their wallets as their voting mechanism. And then on the other side, from the inside out, is team members want to work for companies that have a greater purpose and meaning too. So it's not just going to become window dressing. It has to be fully integrated too. And that's the other thing I've seen, is like, it could be slapped on, or it could be fully integrated and be something that's much bigger than just I don't know, a monthly transactional thing.
Yeah, it's so interesting you should say that last point. I was in a group on social media, and someone had asked the question, hey, I'm looking for some, trendy business clothes that I can wear when I do lives on social media. And do you have any companies to recommend? And people kept recommending Shine, SHEIN, which is this Chinese company that's known as like a destroyer of fashion,
like fast fashion, right?
fast fashion industry, right? And what the fast fashion industry, for those of you who do not know, is we used to have 4 seasons in clothing, winter, spring, summer, and fall, and the new lines would come out once a quarter, essentially. And then when fast fashion started, we had 52 seasons every week. People would come out with new fashion, and the idea was to create a consumption market, that if you were wearing the same item of clothing more than once, it was considered bad. And so people were just buying and buying and buying. And the thing is, if you're not looking at what the company is doing, how they're producing, how their workers are treated, what kind of water sourcing, how much pollution are they creating? So it was fascinating to finally see when someone said, I buy clothes from Shine, and other people coming on and saying, listen, you may not know this, but that's one of the worst companies in the world. And I love that there's becoming a conscious consumerism. I think that's where it is going to be. And yet there's a lot of people that I know And I was one of them when I came online. It's like, can I make money selling Changing the World? Because if I want to really make money online or anywhere else, it's like, let me show you how to make money. Because I could do that. You could do that. Right. But really, that's not fulfilling. It doesn't
Right.
serve my purpose. And so how can we talk to change makers, people who want to be these cosmic catalysts and really evoke this change in the world? Because you have to have a certain amount of courage, right? Because it's not a straight line.
Yeah, it's usually not a straight line. And the entrepreneurs that we work with too a lot are, we call them stage 3 entrepreneurs. So there's two, there's, ones like you who are mission, like, your mission already, you got it. And you want the community of others that think big like that and don't, aren't like, oh my God, we can't do that. But the other group is they've been successful, are successful. And they're like, how do I step into more fully what I want to do in the world? And this impact, this, being a change maker, whatever it is, that you're more fully aligned about, without losing it all, without, without giving up what I've already done before. And that is definitely not a linear path. And it's so much of like exploration of who you are. And that's where it starts. I mean, all of this starts with us. We all know that. And we're like, oh, the outside world has to change, or this person has to change, or this thing has to change before this happens. And that's never the case. It's always us, and it's always doing the deeper work of exploring who we are. And so, when things are kind of going sideways for me, it was going deep again about, who am I? What is my greatest, what's the why? What's all that, the shadow work, all the stuff that you don't want the world to see, like, all of it. And it's a constant sort of evolutionary process to go back and look at that. But then the more conscious you are of all those things, then you can make decisions from, I think, a greater lens too. So like one of the things I talk about in the Evolved Enterprise book that came out of that sort of sideways piece was, you mentioned with Shine, like water consumption and how they treat their workers and all these things. So there's all these different levers that business have of where you can make that difference. Like, so supply chain, we got our distribution, our voice, we got our talent within the organization, like ideas and what's our unique sort of gift. You got empowered employment is what I call it, like, deciding specifically, like, who do we want to employ and what do we do with them? And then you got your product or service itself, and how do we bake in that impact? And I notice I haven't even said like donations, like, or capital or anything like that. That's, so you can be all these different levers that you can pull. And that's where it gets exciting, because you don't have to throw away your business side when you're making these big changes. And to me, that's even better. Like, again, aligning your head, your heart, your higher purpose. So then it's like, okay, if I could have, use all my business sense, but then align it with like, what's the change I want to see and the impact that I really care about. And then you start stepping into your higher purpose, which to me is like, you start thinking in this mythic term, like you start thinking like in, I love Carl Jung, and like you thinking like, all right, the archetypes, and you thinking like these ways of, he wrote something called the Red Book, which is this amazing thing that he only published post his death, that he was able to put that out there because he thought people would think it was way too weird, and he didn't want to be I don't know, taken as a bit of a loon in his profession. But so, but there's all about this mythic aspect of, and so you start listening to your dreams, and you start listening to, like, again, these synchronicities and things like that, and you see what shows up.
Yeah. And one of the things that Wayne Dyer is one of my big spiritual gurus, and he talks about the definition of coincidence. So we often think that coincidence is, what a funny, weird mistake, but look how it worked out, right? Such coincidence, I ran into you at the airport in Vienna. How weird, right? As opposed to what coincidence actually means from its origins is two angles that fit together perfectly. They're coincident. And so we've taken this language that means goes together, and we've made it into magical surprise. And so I love that he talks about this, because when we talk about synchronicity, when we talk about there are no mistakes in the universe, I mean, even when I had to have my neck cut open and, was paralyzed for a long time, there is no coincidence. That was my alarm clock. That was my cosmic alarm clock. It's like I had been on this path, and there was just a deeper piece that I needed to get to. And so the universe is like, let me knock you out.
Right.
There's no coincidences in that. It's what I needed at the time. Could I see it? No. But what I love about this conversation, and I'd love to go a little bit deeper here, is like, we don't trust coincidences. We don't trust synchronicities because we don't think they're repeatable. And as humans, we need consistency. We need to know that the income is consistent. We need to know that our partner is consistent. We need to know that I can expect what I can expect because it makes me feel like I'm in control. And yet, the magic of this galaxy, of this universe, of us being here, is in those synchronous moments. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of, I mean, you wrote the Cosmic Journal. I can't wait for you to pull some cards and us to dig in. I know we said we're going to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was, so I love synchronicities. They're one of my favorite topics to talk about. And you can't talk about it on the rational, logical mind level. And that's where I think, so many people kind of get stuck. It's like, and sometimes they're like trying to talk themselves out of something that was magical, and not even just allowing that magic to be there and be like, this is amazing, like, and take that in. Like, so when I experience synchronicities, there's feelings of awe and surprise and magic and just like sometimes like laughter and just like, wow. And there are ways of, again, I think of this, actually one of the pages I wrote in the journal says like synchronicities are a love letter from the universe written across space and time to you. And so, that's the way I think about it, right?
Let's capture that, folks. Synchronicities are a love letter from the universe. What was the last part?
Yeah, written across time and space, I think is the way that I
written across time and space for you. Oh, so good.
But and so if you think about it like that, it is this two-way conversation, right? It's like, what am I moving towards? Here's the universe responding to me. The universe doesn't respond to us in, I don't know, hey, Suzanne, you need to go do this today. But it responds in symbols and signs and synchronicities and chance meetings and chance books. And, there's so many. So I think when you start chronicling them, so again, journaling is a great way for it, or even keep, a little note tab open in your phone or whatever. Like I have an album of pictures that are synchronicity pictures in my phone. I have I think I have a note little file of those, but then on my journal, I keep them all the time as well. So when you start capturing them, you're like, oh, okay. And you bring more awareness to them. They start showing up more and more and more and more. And I have so many of these that just continued showing up. And many times they're across years, sometimes they're across. And so when you keep track of them, so for instance, like the Thousand Suns piece, I read the Bhagavad Gita a couple of years after that. And there's a chapter called the Cosmic Vision, of course, right? Cosmic Vision.
Of course.
And in there is a quote that says something like, if I have it here somewhere, but it says, if let me find it exactly. So I think it's a great quote. It says, if 1,000 suns were to rise in the heavens at the same time, the blaze of their light would resemble the splendor of that supreme spirit. And so 1,000 suns, right? And then there's another time that this like connected to me with something else that has become my medicine and a lot of the work that I do, which is around cacao. And so I had a presenter do a cacao ceremony with us with Mavericks a couple years back, and it told the story of this sloth that lives on the celestial hammock and then transformed into this ugly old man to go visit the cacao sisters to give them this gift to give to humanity. And long story short, this one sister ended up marrying this ugly old man. And then he changed back into this being of 1,000 suns. And everyone like kind of looked around and laughed. And they're like, oh my God, you're the cosmic sloth. And I was like, these little threads. But then I kept pulling on that thread and following it. And it's turned into something absolutely amazing. And you just start following these things and just realize, if you let it, that our world is so much more magical and powerful in that way. And I taught my kids this a couple of years ago. Do you want to hear how I taught them
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so we have something called the 13 silver keys that we created that are kind of like our core values. Essentially, you know, you have core values in business. So why not create core values for your family? And
Mm, the
this is
silver
not,
keys, that's so good. Your last name is
yeah,
Silver.
they're fun. So we would have like Sunday dinners and we talk about it. So we did like an offsite where we had all the kids write on post-it notes, like what's it mean to be, you know, a silver and you know, at your highest level. And my daughter's like, I never would have done this if I knew that this was going to be held against me and used in these ways. So they have a love-hate, mostly hate-ish relationship with it, but there's one that they love, and it's called Make Magic. And so that's the 13th one. And we talked about this, like, so we're going to go visit summer camps for them many years ago. And I'm like, hey, all right, so what do you want to see on the road trip? Like whatever we see, maybe we'll see it. And they're like, oh, I want to see a horse. And the other one's like, I want to see a dog. I'm like, okay, that's super easy. And like literally within, you know, 2 miles or 3 miles, we saw a horse and a dog. And then my wife, who's, you know, this very pragmatic, she's a great foil for me. And she's like, I want to see a penguin. I'm like, okay, you know, and so we're driving up to Pennsylvania. And there's not really penguins on the side of the road, but you know, and I'm like, we'll see one. And she's like, okay. And so we go and visit this camp, and I'm like, okay, I feel like I started feeling the sense of it. And we're in the art room, and I'm like, oh, it's got to be here, but it wasn't there. But I was on the right track, and then we only visited one bunk to just go see how the kids live. And on some kid's bunk was a picture of a penguin, like that they
No way.
made in the art class, right? So I had that little tingling of like, all right, I feel like there's something here. And that's the way the universe also shows up, right? It's not going to be a live penguin that's at the side of the road, probably. I mean, who knows? But so, and I'm like, here, her name's Missy. I'm like, Miss, here's your penguin. She's like, oh my God. And then so on the way home, you know, we told the kids, here's the story, you know, the penguin. And they're like, oh, okay. And then they got kind of a little bolder. And my daughter's like, okay, I want to see a polar bear. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I want to see an ice cube. And so we're in a bunch of traffic, and we had to get off the road, and we all had to go pee. And so we went to this little convenience store, and on the way in was an ice maker, and it had a picture of an ice cube with a polar bear inside of it. I'm like, there it is, Zoe. And she's like, oh my God. So Make Magic has become like the thing that they remember forever.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
I love it. You know, a lot of people who work with me who are here online, or some or many are new to my world. I call it playing volleyball with the universe. And what you throw up is what you get back. So if you throw up, I want to see a polar bear, the universe sees that and goes, oh, they want a polar bear. Throws you
Right.
down. It might not be that minute, but the
Yeah.
universe has got it in its bag of tricks, right? But if you throw up a ball and it's covered with shit about all the things that are wrong in your life, like no one pays me ever, or no one's ever going to love me, or whatever crap you want to cover this ball, you throw the volleyball up, and the universe doesn't recognize the word I don't want. It doesn't recognize I don't like, or I don't have. What it recognizes is the thing you throw.
Yeah.
And so it's going to throw
feelings,
you back.
frequency, and
Going to throw you back a shit covered ball. And you know what happens when you catch a shit covered ball? You get covered with shit.
yeah. And they're like, I knew it. You're like, that's exactly what I thought. And
Exactly. And our thoughts create our reality. I study the Tao a lot, and this is all about that. It's like we opened this conference with the idea of learning to convert our being from a being that's always focused on getting to a being that's focused on giving. And it is in the giving that you receive. But we often think it's the other way around. So if I just like, I want it, I need it, I want it, I need it, I'm desperate for it. That's not how we produce it. We do it in the openness and just the little whispers with the universe. Hey, here's my volleyball. I want to see a polar bear.
yeah, and it's you know, I've experimented with this. Like I think of them as experiments, right? Like why not, you know, be like, this is playful, like have some experiments. And we've done this like you know, my son plays travel hockey, so spent a lot of time in the car, and so I'm like, hey, you know, what do you want to see? And he'll be like, oh, I don't know, penguins dancing. Like, you know, he still remembers the thing from many years ago. I'm like, okay, we'll see penguins dancing. And you know, sure as heck, we saw penguins dancing, and you never know how it's going. Like it was someone in their house, they had like little cutout penguins in their yard dancing around. I'm like, look, He's like, oh, that's cool. You know, he's a teenage boy. It wasn't like, but it's so incredible. And I think there's also an element of like cheerful expectancy, so that you're like, yeah, I know it's going to show up in some way, and not holding it so tightly, like not being attached to it also, but that just being open to how it's going to show up, and also just being really, I don't know, the more, so this has been new for me, is like, what is the frequency? What's the emotion? What's the feeling that I want? And that to me has been even more so like, so I used to be, big into goal setting. I'd be like, okay, I want this thing. And then, like, I went to a Brian Tracy seminar when I was like 18, and he had to like write down, what you want. And I wrote down, 10 things or whatever. And now I promptly lost that thing. And then I remember found it many years later, and 7 out of 10 of them came true. And even better, like one was like, oh, I wanted a Mercedes SLK with a little convertible car. And then I had an SL55 AMG, which is, an even better version of that. And so then it became, I want, this thing, or sooner, or better, or more, or whatever, because then it allowed the universe to kind of like show up and be a little more, wide in what that was. And then I remember I found my journal entry from like, this is what I want when I'm 40 years old. And I was like, okay, I want this amount in the bank, and I want, be hanging out with this sort of celebrity or person for my dinner for birthday. And like, I was like, what do I want on my actual 40th birthday? And so I went back and I showed it to my wife, and she's like, oh, this didn't really happen. I'm like, she's like, are you upset? I'm like, and I thought about it for a second. I'm like, no, because that amount of money that I put in there was all about like, I want to do work with people that I love, and do the things that I want to do with people that I want to do it with. The person I wrote as like a celebrity I ended up going on my actual birthday. I went to Virgin Galactic to go see the unveiling of the Virgin Galactic spaceship.
Oh,
And
wow.
got invited by Richard Branson to go on a safari like 2 weeks after that. Right. So it was like even better than what I could have imagined. And there's a couple other things. So it was like all of it. And I had written a certain car that I wanted, and it ended up being, that car was actually a lemon. Like, it was like not a very good car and I won't mention it, but it was, so anyway, it was like so many things. It was like, okay, now it's all about the feeling. Like, what's the feelings that I want? What's the actual intention? And I have a little plaque that sits on my desk too that I really love. And this really summarizes it incredibly well.
Can you read it out loud to us? It's a little hard to see.
Yeah. So it says, trust the universe has even more in store for you than you can imagine. Trust the divine timing. Trust your crazy ideas. Trust your wings will grow when you leap. Trust your nature. Trust you've been encoded with the cosmic alarm clock. Trust the signs, symbols, and synchronicities sent to you. Trust the co-conspirators catalyzing your conscious evolution. Trust the perfect unfolding of your understanding, and trust your divine connections.
Mm. So good. That just feels delicious.
And
Yes,
that
please.
was,
I'll order one of those.
yeah, exactly. And it's like, trust of the universe has even more in store for you than you can imagine. So all this came to me at sunrise on my favorite place in the world, which is Necker Island. And I was leading a session that morning. So we had been doing for a couple of years, me and a partner had been running the trip together. And then we decided to run it ourselves. And this is the very first year we were running it ourselves. And there's like a little bit of anxiety around it. I got up early, meditated, and this is what came through to me in my journal. And it was also at the end of the trip. It was an amazing trip. And at the end of it, it was the very first time I had ever read anything that I had written in my journal. And so Sophia, who's my business partner, she's also my cousin. She noticed that and the way that people responded to it. And she ended up creating these plaques for people as like an amazing gift for them. And we do some great gifting. You'll wait to see when you show up to things. But so the gifting that showed up for people afterwards. And
yeah, we have to reveal to people. I joined Maverick after Yanik and I met. I was like, sign me up for growth fun and higher purpose. Sign me up. I want to hang with you guys.
Totally. So we're waiting for the first time that we actually meet in person, even though it feels like we met for several lifetimes already.
Exactly.
But so I went to one of my buddy's houses, and he has, a very amazing house in California and LA. And the very first thing I see when I walk in on a mantle is the plaque. And I'm like, okay, like, that was pretty incredible. And it means so much to people. And so it was also like a little bit of like, all these like it's kind of a synchronicity, kind of not like, but it was a nudge. I think there's like a little bit of like, hey, this is the right track, and so maybe do more of this. And then I ran into, like, I was, this idea of like following your heart, especially when it makes no apparent logical sense. It's like, what's a curiosity? What's something that you're intrigued by? And then you see what happens. So again, it's like these experiments. And for me, one of them was, I saw this art challenge going on for 100 days of art every single day. And I'm like, that's a lot. And I'm like, but that would be really interesting. And in my journal, I'm like, oh, who knows what would happen with it? It could be a cool byproduct, but let's do it. And so I made it 108 days of art every single day. And so I got a little moleskin. I made 108 check boxes, like little boxes. And literally every single night, no matter what, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, I would draw a page in this journal, no matter what, something that came to me that felt like it came through me. Sometimes it was like past years of journals I would pull out and be like, oh, this is something cool that I want to rewrite or in some way capture. And it was just for myself. And then, but like a day 40 or 50, I was like, wow, this is like an oracle. Like I would just pop it open and I'd be like, oh, what's the message I need to hear? And then that ended up turning into the Cosmic Journal. And there was no order. There was no like, big arc to it. And then I kept showing it to my friends. I'm like, here, check this out. Here, pull a page. And they're like, this is amazing. And one of my friends was like, this is incredible. I see how lit up you are about it. I'm going to pay you to publish this thing. Because before it was like it was not a thing. It was just a fun project. And there's so many other things that had my attention of like what made more business sense. And he's like, oh, I'll pay to publish this thing for you. And I'm like, okay. And so we made 888 of these purple edition, limited edition ones. And then
can you open it and show people?
Yeah, well, actually, let's pull a page.
Let's pull a page. Okay, let's do it. So Yanik is one of his love languages is clearly gifts, because when you join Maverick, you get lots of gifts, which is so much fun because they're always really cool. And I got a copy of the journal and oh my God, it's amazing. So please pull a page.
All right, let's pull a page. We're going to use the actual purple one. All right. So this is fun because there's a white one too, and there's a purple one. There's two.
I have the white one.
This is not in the white one. I need to get you a purple one.
Okay. Oh my God.
Says, when will your Pixar moment be? And so this is you can see the little Pixar little whatever that thing is. Actually, I ended up getting a lamp just like the Pixar lamp because I love this aspect. So there's a great book by Ed Catmull from Pixar called Creativity Inc. And he talks about the story. And so the quote in here says, the only thing that made the leap easier was that we had decided to go all in on what we yearned to do from the onset, computer animation. That was where our true passion resided. And the only option left was to go after it with everything we had. So perfect for what we're talking about, which is, how do you make that leap? How do you, and so their story, I don't know how much you know about Pixar's story and Ed Catmull's story.
I know bits of it, but not enough.
Yeah. So in this journal page,
Elizabeth says she's read the book.
Okay, awesome.
And she also asked if you could share the trust plaque because she'd like to have it pinned up in her home.
So I'll give you a secret. It's the first page of the Cosmic Journal.
It's the first page. Okay.
Yeah, so it's the first page.
You can buy the Cosmic Journal on Amazon or
from Hay House. Yeah. And so anyway, Ed Catmull, he founded Pixar. And his dream, he had held on to this dream going on for 20 years. And he started a technology company to do what he wanted to, what he thought it was to do, like just to pay the bills. And he wasn't ready for what his real work was. But this like yearning never went out, this little fire about, I want to build a full animation, computer generated animation movie. And so it almost reads like a movie, his life and all these like twists and turns and then failures and obstacles and all these things that ultimately led to really the most iconic studio, or one of the most iconic studios ever. And the synchronicities and perfect timing, this is what I wrote in here, really opened up to their destiny. And there's so many reasons for Pixar not to even exist. So 1979, New York Institute of Technology, went to work on computer tech for films with George Lucas. He developed this little digital technology when it didn't exist. And it was like this, it was nothing compared to obviously what it was now, but it was a start. And then he made a little 2-minute animation to show people what could be done. George Lucas runs into financial trouble from a divorce. And they sell the division to Philips, which is the big industrial, medical company. So then they start to create something around that. Then Jobs attempts to make a deal and doesn't work. They change directions. They create this like next generation of computers to help other people with this animation or rendering or something, but it wasn't, it was like too expensive. It doesn't work. So Jobs comes back. He doesn't want to take it over. He buys the division for $5 million from Lucasfilms. And then they start selling this little Pixar image computer, but the price proves to be too high. And they just can't find their business model. And so Jobs tries to sell it 3 different times. And he keeps getting offers. And he's like, oh, no. And then they stop selling hardware and finally go all in on animation in 1991. And then Disney and Jobs come up with a distribution deal. And then so Toy Story is born in 1995 from when they finally went all in. And that was, they made 362 million in worldwide box office. And obviously the rest is history. So there's like so many times that it was like this. So one of the things that I love and the idea of Ganesh and so it's like, so many people have seen this, as the elephant-headed deity, and a lot of people know, like, oh, it's this, it's designed to move obstacles out of your path and a bestower of good fortune and good luck and so forth. So some people have Ganesh statues because of that, but Ganesh is also known as the placer of obstacles, which I love. And so, like you can see in that story, there's all these potential obstacles that at the time we're like, oh my God, this is not working. Like, why can't we sell the computer hardware? Why can't we do this? But all of it led to this perfect path of going back all in on what he wanted to do all along, which was create this full-blown computer animation. So I have this idea of, when's your Pixar moment? And by the way, I use my Cosmic Journal, like I kind of eat my own dog food, right? So I will flip it open and I'll write whatever comes to me in there as well. And that's the way the Cosmic Journal is designed, is you flip it open and it has a message for you. And then on the left-hand side is a space for you to fill in whatever comes to you. And so for me, what I wrote was this whole little picture of the cosmic vision. And it also says evil schemes for global good is part of that.
I love that. And if you actually go into the guides where I have Yanik's bio, I used a photograph of him in front of one of his drawings as the background. Elizabeth says she just bought the Cosmic Journal.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
If you were to have a little bit of guided wisdom for the humans who are with us live and for the humans that are going to catch this in replay, and they want to live a life of more purpose, a life of more meaning, and yet they have some fears of the logistics of that. And I know for you, as a dad, as a husband, as a provider of the family, as we said earlier, it's not a straight line. When you decide that you want to take a different direction, there's a lot of heaviness that potentially could fill the void, fill the space that you're creating by the pivot. What advice would you have for people who know that living in this more traditional world is not for them, and they want to go the path of the entrepreneur, they want to go the path of inspired action? What would you say to them?
Well, there's 2 things. One is I always go back to this, and it's also in the Cosmic Journal, which is, following your heart is frequently scary, but never wrong. And the picture that I drew is kind of based on Shel Silverstein's Where the Sidewalk Ends, where you got like a little kid like looking down, but I have this little heart that's jumping off. And it's so true. It's like, we start making up excuses or getting into our logical reasons for why this can't work or what we have to do, or all the, sort of obligations that we have. And so, again, like that cosmic alarm clock, it will kind of hit you harder and harder and harder. So for me, it was a financial thing where it was that $400,000 and it was also selling my Aston Martin. It was, doing all the things where it's like, it forced me to like, be like, all right, well, what do I really want to do here? And when I did make that bigger leap, it wasn't with this huge safety net of like, oh, like, I had, enough money in the bank, but it wasn't like enough that it's just unlimited that I could just do whatever I wanted forever. But I was like, I don't know, like I have to do this or else it feels like I'm letting myself down. And I remember many years ago, so I love adventures and experiences. And I remember many years ago, I was doing a halo skydive, which is a high altitude, low opening skydive with an oxygen mask, and it's from 30,000 feet. And one of my buddies, yeah. So like the next time you're in a regular airplane, just look out the window and be like, oh, this would be interesting to skydive out of.
I've skydived, but not from that height.
Yeah. So my buddy calls me, he's like, dude, what are you doing? You have two little kids. And I have very little kids at this point. I'm like, yeah, I'm showing them that you should follow your adventures in your heart and so forth. And that's what, I also think about is like, how would you want your kids or anyone else that's sort of looking at you be like, all right, they follow their path, and it's really a pathless path. It's not like there's other people that have left markers, which is great, but your own path is going to be different. And that's also why, these synchronicities and these signs and symbols start showing up, and they're magical in your own way. Like synchronicities are usually like kind of like specific for you, that you understand it in a very unique way. And that's why, like when you try and explain it to someone, they're like, oh, that's kind of cool. Okay, that number showed up, or that, but no, you're like, you don't understand. This is this thing. And like, so, who cares? And so the Cosmic Journal is a good example of it, because there was no business plan. There's no like, all right, I'm going to do this, and I have this thing laid out. And so I ended up getting a meeting with the president of Hay House, which is one of the biggest transformational book publishers out there. And I'm like, here, pick a page. And he's like, okay. And he pulls a page out, and he's like, huh. And he pulls another one. He's like, huh. And he's like, I've never seen anything like this. And because it was really written for me, it was written, it wasn't written to be a bestseller. It wasn't written to, with a marketing plan. And so then they fast forwarded a contract for the journal and for a set of cards, these Oracle cards. And so that was the second thing that I was going to say is, let's get advice from the Oracle cards about what for that person. And then that'll be your homework, because there's a prompt in here.
Amazing. I love it. What a beautiful way to close up our session.
Yeah. So I can either pull a card, or you can pick a number, your choice.
How much, what they go from what number?
1 to 44 for the prompts. So we can
I was about to say 44, so now I know.
All right, 44. All right, hold on. Let me go to. Am I allowed to do a screen share?
You are.
All right, hold on. All right. Oh, this makes total sense. Ready? Here's the card. Look who shows up in there.
The elephant, Ganesh.
And what we were talking about, your words create worlds.
Yes,
so
they do.
This is pretty perfect. So I'm going to read you the card, and then the prompt will be the homework for everyone that will leave them. So your words create worlds. Your words are the magic spell that builds stories that either serve you or muffle your dreams. What words are you speaking forth into the world at this moment? Listen carefully to those around you. What do you hear? Our language determines what we believe is possible or impossible. Our words truly create worlds. Slow down to bring awareness to what you are truly saying in conversations with others and with yourself internally. Before you try something, are your words about it empowering, or are you already down and defeated? By drawing this card, you are now free from all old stories that have been told by others, no matter how well-meaning they may have been. You're released and free to use the language of creation and conception. So pretty darn right on the mark. So here's the cosmic catalyst, which is the prompt. What is a personal power phrase I can tell myself when I feel overwhelmed, scared, or uncertain of what to do next? So what's a personal power phrase I can tell myself when I feel overwhelmed, scared, or uncertain of what to do next?
As you were reading that card, I literally felt my angel wings come out. That's what I felt happen. That was delicious. I love it so.
So, I
you
really...
guys get why I love this man so much. He's so cool.
Thanks, Suzanne. Yeah, it's so fun. Just playing with the universe, and when you're feeling like you don't know, like it doesn't make logical sense, it's there's like just you figure out what are those words that are going to create the world that you really want.
Mm. You've given us so much to think about. Elizabeth says she's your new biggest fan. I
Awesome.
think you have to get in line, Elizabeth. And I just want to thank you for your time, your talent, your wisdom, your absolute deep connection to source, our connection. It means the world to me. I can't wait till we hang out for your birthday. That is going to be a blast.
It's going to be so much fun.
Thank you, Yanik. Thank you for being here. And thank you everyone for tuning in such a beautiful way. I'm so excited. Thank you for being here. I'll see you soon.
Okay, bye.